Now, communicating with others, the development and use of language. Human language is the most complex behavior on the planet, and at least as far as we know in the universe. Language involves both the ability to comprehend spoken and written words and to create communication in real time when we speak or write. Most languages are oral, generated through speaking. Speaking involves a variety of complex cognitive, social, and biological processes, including operation of the vocal cords and coordination of breath with movements of the throat and mouth and tongue. Other languages are sign languages, in which the communication is expressed by movements of the hands. Although language is often used as the transmission of information, this is only its most mundane function. Language also allows us to access existing knowledge, to draw conclusions, to set and accomplish goals, and to understand and communicate complex social relationships. Now, what are the components of language? The phoneme is the smallest unit of sound that makes a meaningful difference in language. There are hundreds of unique phonemes that can be made by human speakers, but most languages only use a small subset of possibilities. English contains about 45 phonemes, whereas other languages have as few as 15 or others more than 16. Now, in addition to using a set of phonemes, because the phoneme is actually a category of sound that are treated alike with the sound language, speakers of different languages are able to hear the differences between some phonemes but not others. Now, what is the biology and development of language? Anyone who has tried to master a second language as an adult knows the difficulty of language learning, and yet children learn languages easily and naturally. Children who are exposed to language early in their lives will likely never learn one. Case studies including the Victor, the wild child who was abandoned as a baby in France and not discovered until the age 12, and Jeannie, a child whose parents kept her locked in a closet from 18 months until 13 years of age, are fortunately two of the only known examples of these deprived children. Both of these children made some progress in socialization after they were rescued, but neither of them ever developed language. This is also why it is important to determine quickly if a child is deaf and to begin immediately to communicate in sign language. Deaf children who are not exposed to sign language during the early years will likely never learn it. For 90% of the people who are right-handed, language is stored and controlled by the left cerebral cortex, although for left-handers this pattern is reversed. Now we talk about learning language. Language learning begins even before birth because the fetus can hear muffled versions of speaking from outside the womb. Now, Moon, Cooper, and Pfeiffer in 1993 found that infants only 2 days old sucked harder on a pacifier when they heard their mother's native language being spoken than when they heard a foreign language, even when strangers were speaking the languages. Babies are also aware of the patterns of the native language, showing surprise when they hear speech that has different patterns of phonemes than those are used to. Now, the early utterance of children contains many errors, for example, confusing B and D and C and Z. The words that children create are often simplified, in part because they are not yet able to make more the complex sound of the real language. Most child's first words are nouns, and early sentences may include only the noun. Ma means more milk please, and da means look there, there's widow. Eventually, the length of the utterance increases to 2 words, moma and da bag, and these primitive sentences begin to follow the appropriate syntax of the native language. Now, what are the theories of language acquisition? How do children learn language? Psychological theories of language learning difference in terms of the importance they place on nature versus nurture, yet it is clear that both matter. Children are not born knowing language, they learn to speak by hearing what happens around them. On the other hand, human brains, unlike those of any other animal, are pre-wired in a way that leads them almost effortlessly to learn language. Now, other evidence that refutes the idea that all languages is learned through experience comes from the observation that children may learn languages better than they ever hear them. Deaf children whose parents do not speak ASL very well nevertheless are able to learn it perfectly on their own and may even make up their own language if they need to. Although there is no general agreement among psychologists that babies are genetically programmed to learn language, there is still debate about Chomsky's idea that there is universal grammar that can account for all languages learning. Now, bilingualism and cognitive development. Although it is less common in the United States than in the other countries, bilingualism, the ability to speak two languages, it is becoming more and more frequent in the modern world. Nearly one half of the world's population, including 80% of the US citizens, grows up as bilingual. In recent years, many US states have passed laws outlining bilingual education in school. These laws are in part based on the idea that students will have a stronger identity with the school, the culture, and the government if they speak only English, and in part based on the idea that speaking two languages may interfere with the cognitive development. Now, can the animals also learn language? Now, non-human animals have a wide variety of systems of communication. Some species communicate using scents, others using visual displays such as baring the teeth, puffing the fur, or flapping the wings, and still others use vocal sounds. Male songbirds such as canaries or finches sing song to attract mates and to protect territory, and chimpanzees use a combination of facial expressions, sounds, and actions such as slapping the ground to convey aggression. Honeybees used a waggle dance to direct other bees to the location of food sources. The language of vervet monkeys is relatively advanced in the sense that they use specific sounds to communicate specific meanings. Vervets make different calls to signify that they have seen either a leopard, a snake, or a hawk. Despite their wide abilities to communicate, efforts to teach animals to use language have had only limited success. One of the early efforts was made by the Catherine and Keith Hayes, who raised a chimpanzee named Vicky in their home along with their own children. But Vicky learned little and could never speak. Researchers speculated that Vicky's difficulties might have been in part because she could not create the words in her vocal cords, and so subsequent attempts were made to teach primates speak using the sign language or by using boards on which they can point to symbols. So, what's about perception? Now, the idea that language and its structure influence and limit human thought is called linguistic relativity. Although the idea of linguistic relativism seems reasonable, research has suggested that language has less influence on the thinking than might be expected. For one, in terms of perception of snow, although it is true that Inuit do make more distinctions among types of snow than do the English speakers. The latter also make some distinctions like powder, slush, whiteout, and so forth. And it is also possible that thinking about snow may influence language rather than the other way around. Now, so this was all about chapter 9. We have covered a vast variety of things in this particular chapter. And I hope that you have gone through the concepts well. In case you have any query, go through the chapter again. We'll be soon coming up with chapter 10. Till then, keep revising, stay safe, stay happy. Thank you.